The following program is a production of the Barroom Network. It is intended for all audiences.
Doug Buffone.
This defense sucks. This is moronic.
John Buffone.
If your best run plays are coming off end-arounds, there's a problem.
Doug was behind the microphone first. He never held back.
Very difficult to score when your offense is on the bench. When your defense is out there giving up 70, 80, 70, 64-yard drives.
Now, it's his nephew, John, and there's no holding this Buffone back either.
An offensive-minded coach that's running an offense that got 9 yards and a half. A beaten-up defense that isn't necessarily performing in key situations. And a quarterback that was expected to take a big step forward looks like an unsalvageable wreck.
I've had it. I have had it. I want somebody to get kicked in the ass.
How many games can you rattle off that involve the team running the ball 7 times and they win? I can't think of any.
I don't mind you getting beat. I got my ass whipped many times. But I tell you, I took somebody down with me.
Because Bears fans wanted to believe in the worst way that Chicago had a stable, competitive franchise. And this is what we got.
It's Buffone 55, the John Buffone Show.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Buffone 55, a fast-paced approach at breaking down the Chicago Bears. And good news, Barflies, the Bears didn't lose this week, mainly because they were on a bye. I am your host, John Buffone. With me, as always, is my producer, co-host, and friend, Alyssa Barbieri. Alyssa, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Like you said, for the first time in over a month, didn't have to watch the Bears lose, got to relax on a Sunday. It was nice. Almost kind of like, I feel like I have some of this false optimism coming back to me. Just, briefly.
Yeah, it was weird. It was kind of like the playoffs started, and I didn't have to worry about watching the Bears. So it was. I guess I might have to get used to that moving forward. But before I introduce our guest, who's going to help us break down the Green Bay Packers this week, can you let our new listeners know what it is we do around here?
Absolutely. So Buffone 55 has 3 segments, and we always begin by learning about the Bears' upcoming opponent from someone who follows them closely. And today we're fortunate to have Ryan Schlipp, host of the Packernet Podcast, tell us all about the Bears' Week 12 opponent. That's then followed by our B55 segment. That's when I ask John 5 questions, and his responses must be completed within 55 seconds. The 55 is John's way of paying tribute to the great Doug Buffone, his uncle, his mentor, and a man who played 15 seasons with the Bears and wore number 55. We then finish up by going into the basement, Buffone's basement, where Aldo Gandia joins John and me, and the 3 of us are going to chug down some Bears talk. So, John, take it away.
Thank you, Alyssa. Now, welcome to Buffone 55. Ryan Schlipp, host of the Packernet Podcast. Ryan, how you doing? Thanks for being on the show.
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
I really want to just jump into this because it's Packers week for the Bears and it's Bears week for the Packers. So I want to give Bears fans as much false hope as possible that they can pull this game out. So the Packers are 3-3 since the bye week, where they've beaten the likes of the Texans, Jaguars, and 49ers. Can you tell our listeners what has been the difference between the pre-bye week Packers and the post-bye week Packers?
Well, the one thing I keep saying on my podcast is the Packers are a team that can beat absolutely anybody and they can lose to absolutely anybody. And if you watched this last week's game, you saw it. The first half is a team that just, obliterated. They put up 28 points on one of the best defenses in football. Only one team put up 28 points in 4 quarters. The second half, they may as well have been the Jets. It was the most pathetic thing you've ever seen in your life. So, in terms of, the Bears getting some kind of false hope, it's real simple. If the second half team shows up, the Bears win, and it's not even going to be really that close.
Oh man, you're gonna pump us up a little bit here.
I'm gonna get you going.
So let's talk about something that the Bears fans aren't accustomed to: great quarterback play. And some of them age like a fine wine. Certainly, you can say that about Aaron Rodgers. Is he as good as he's ever been this season? Does he have a fire lit underneath him when the Packers went and grabbed a quarterback in the first round?
That is some bad news I have for you. Aaron Rodgers is playing like we haven't seen in a very long time. He's had a couple bad games. This past week was a little iffy, But there's no question, at least since 2014, and if you look at the PFF stats, it's right now he's grading out higher than he ever has. So you got him right now is graded out as the number one quarterback. Devontae's having his best year, which is shocking. He's graded out as the number one wide receiver. So there are some real big positives. And yeah, he's looking great. But again, it's kind of iffy. And one of the real negatives for the Packers is the biggest struggle they have is really, really good defenses. When you're able to fluster them and get them out of their rhythm, that's when things tend to fall apart. And I think the Bears are, if anybody, more or less capable of that.
We're in the second year of this Aaron Rodgers, Matt LaFleur connection. Have you seen it flourishing, or what has been the progression with the head coach with this, with Aaron Rodgers and this team in general?
I think the scheme's looking great. There's a couple hiccups, but in comparison to season one, it looked kind of clunky. It looked a little bit like a Mike McCarthy, Matt LaFleur hybrid, and it was just kind of ugly. This year, you're starting to see more of the Matt LaFleur, and not only are they doing it, but it's starting to be more successful. The one downside is that a major aspect of the offense is being able to run the ball well, and in the beginning of the year, they did it really, really well. I mean, everything was clicking. For some reason, it's just not quite clicking, and the offensive line, they've been shuffling a lot of injuries and whatnot, but that's been a bit of a complication. But there's no question, you look at the sort of Kyle Shanahan-style offense, that's starting to take hold, and there's glimmers of hope there.
The Packers got a lot of heat for not going out and getting another wide receiver to complement Davante Adams. Can you tell us a little bit about this Packer receiving corps? Has anyone risen to the occasion to really take a hold of that number 2 spot?
Well, it would definitely be Allen Lazard. He's been pretty solid throughout. I don't know, there's been, I would still say too small of a sample size to know for sure if he's the answer. But, I mean, from what we've seen, when he's healthy, and he just came back for the first time in a while this past week, he's been injured, but he's more than capable of filling that number 2 spot. I mean, he's clearly not a number 1, but as far as number 2s around the league, you can't really go wrong with Allen Lazard. Now you got MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is starting to show flashes. He had a real bad fumble at the end of that game, but about 2 or 3 weeks in a row now, he's really starting to rise to the occasion. And again, I don't know long-term if he's the answer, but he's looked pretty well. So the wide receivers have not been the issue as of late.
Obviously, the NFL is a game of attrition, and every team deals with injuries. The Green Bay Packers have obviously dealt with some injuries. As far as a health standpoint, how are the Packers looking going into the final quarter of the season? It's
actually one of the healthier periods of the season. The wide receivers are – I mean, I haven't seen the most recent report, but it was the first time we've had our running backs all together, our receivers all together. David Bakhtiari's back. He's been out for a while. For the most part, Corey Linsley did get hurt in that last game. We got to see what his status is, our center. But the cornerbacks, Jair and Kevin King, have kind of alternated injuries. They were both back. So they're, for the most part, pretty close to full strength.
You mentioned the offensive line there, and the Bears have been trying to get a pass rush going with Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn for a while. What's the state of the offensive line for Green Bay? Any kind of weaknesses that the Bears can try to attack there?
Well, Packer fans are real excited about Billy Turner. I've been extremely skeptical. Most Packer fans have, but he's kind of risen to the occasion this year. The biggest thing that I keep cautioning people about is the Packers have not faced one really good pass rusher this year. I mean, you could name a couple people. DeForest Buckner's not the worst player in the world, but I don't think they've faced – well, I know they haven't faced anyone to the stature of Khalil Mack, and he's going to be lined up primarily against Billy Turner, who I still believe is probably the weak spot. Again, he hasn't statistically been that horrible, and ESPN likes him and all that kind of nonsense, but I'm really worried about what's going to happen when he goes up against a premier pass rusher, and I do think that's going to be the matchup to watch out for.
We like to talk about offensive line depth here on Buffone 55 because the Bears don't have any. So when the Packers went out and got John Runyon Jr., that was to the chagrin of a lot of the people over here at the Barroom Network, including someone working the controls on this show. So can you give us a little bit of what maybe you've seen from John Runyon Jr. going into the season and let us know what we missed out on in Chicago?
Yeah, well, first of all, I agree. As one of the things I've been talking about with the Bears is how much I appreciated back in the day the offensive line and how it was doing, and you hate to watch, no matter the team, whether it's the Cowboys or Seattle or whoever, just the offensive line start to fall apart. And the Packers do a good job of, especially later round, finding guys that are plug and play. Runyon, I think, has been solid. He's stepped in several times. We've had multiple people that have been rotated in. We've got three offensive line we picked in the 6th round. So of that 3, there's a pretty decent stable. Again, you worry about with contracts coming up or any of these guys that you want to start. But as far as backups that you can rely on a pinch, I think Runyon has been solid, and everybody really appreciates the toughness that he brings to the offensive line. He's a mean physical guy, and we all really like that.
Yeah, something we would have liked in Chicago as well. Let's switch sides of the ball now. Packers got into the quarterback much less this season from last season. Is there any reason that we see regression in those statistics? Is there something that we're missing that that isn't showing up on a box score? What's going on with Green Bay's pass rush?
Well, to some degree, you kind of expected it. I think Preston Smith's numbers were inflated. Zadarius had a once-in-a-career kind of year, but for it to be this bad is a little bit surprising, and you're seeing it in certain places around the league where there's just some question marks about what exactly is going on. We're starting to see people wake up a little bit as far as Zadarius. Rashawn Gary has now put 2 pretty good games together. He's just not doing anything. Preston Smith, our other edge rusher. Kenny Clark has been really, really bad and injured, but again, starting to wake up a little bit. So there's glimmers of hope in that regard. The pass rush is still not exactly where you'd want it to be. And I think another possible answer to that question is Mike Pettin, our defensive coordinator. He seems to be a little bit more passive. Last year, one of the bigger problems they had, although they were racking up stats, was they gave up a lot of big plays. This year, not as many big plays, but I think they're playing off, right? They're trying to secure the edge as opposed to attack off the edge. That's just seemingly what they're doing, and they're just not really releasing the hounds quite as much, which I personally, I'd take the big plays if it means getting the quarterback on his back, but it doesn't seem to be the case as much this year.
Every week we talk to somebody who says, well, if the Bears are going to break out on the ground, it's going to be this week. And every week we see the Bears not really have that much success on the ground. I have a feeling that you might say something similar along those lines with Green Bay's run defense, but in Chicago, we don't have a whole lot of hope that the coaching staff is going to rely heavily on that run game. If they switch things around and Mitch Trubisky is in there and they go back to some of the things that they were doing in the first couple weeks and they run the ball more, is this a defense that they could have some success on?
I think so. I mean, you never really know, and I think it's a little overstated as far as the Packers run D. But one of the biggest things is if it's working, it's going to keep working because again, I'm going to pick on my defensive coordinator here. He refuses to get out of dime and nickel defense. So you run and it's successful and it's successful and it's successful, and he refuses. He will not bring in another linebacker. He will not bring any help, and so it puts the defense in a real tough pinch to where you're relying on your front 4 to make plays. And outside of Kenny Clark, we just don't have those guys. So, it could go either way. Again, the Bears running attack has not been all that impressive, and the Packers show flashes. But it's pretty rare to completely shut a team down, especially toward the end of the game when they start getting gassed. That's when you start to see some chunks.
One thing that isn't up for debate is the play of the 2 cornerbacks in Green Bay, Jair Alexander and Kevin King. Can you tell us a little bit about their performance this year, and if Bears fans can expect maybe not such a big game from Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney?
Well, I mean, Jair has been unbelievable. I mean, he's, I talked about how our offensive line hasn't gone up against anybody. Jair has shut down some of the premier wide receivers in the game. He might give up 1 or 2 here or there, but it's one of those things you expect to break eventually, and it just hasn't happened. I'm expecting someone to get a 100-yard game against Jair. He has been extremely consistent and solid this whole year. Not so much in terms of pass breakups or interceptions, almost more, and I hate to use the comparison because it's kind of ridiculous, but a Richard Sherman thing where you just don't see him all game. Like they just don't throw that direction, so you don't even know he's on the field, which I'll take that all day of the week. Kevin King's a little bit more iffy. He's real big, he's real tall, he's real fast. So certain receivers he matches up with a little better than others. He's not the most shifty guy in the world, so I mean he'll get kind of left in the dust here and there. So he's a little bit up and down. You might be able to get a little bit, but again, if Jair is primarily locked into your number 1, that could cause some problems.
And because we can't really help ourselves around here, we always ask about special teams because, that's what we are synonymous with in Chicago. Special teams, good or bad, we're synonymous with it. So is there anyone on the special teams unit, be it the kicker, punter, long snapper, gunner, anything that Bears fans should key in on, whether it's good or bad from the Green Bay's perspective?
It's been bad. I mean, it's perennially been bad for the Packers, and it's not really different this year. I'm a big fan of J.K. Scott, the guy we drafted, but he last week was not very good at all. We had a return man, Shepard, who was just, I mean, he does nothing. He goes down on the first guy. He had a fumble last week. It's just the Colts last week made it a point to kick it as close to the 1 yard line as they could. Don't kick it into the end zone. He did a phenomenal job of that. Every kick was at the 1 yard line exactly. But if you can just kick it inside the 5 and make him return it, we're going to be starting at the 10 yard line every single time. It is just there's no hope there. And then you force the Packers to drive all the way down the field, which again is going to be tough against your defense. But if there's anything that's good, obviously Mason Crosby is a very good, kicker. He's not going to miss very many field goals. So if we get that opportunity, that's probably a guarantee for whatever that's worth.
All right, before I send you over to Alyssa, you've given us a lot to think about, a lot to feel positive about, but overall, what's your prediction for Sunday night's game?
Man, I usually get a better feel, but I just don't know. I do feel a little bit more confident after that game, seeing what they did to the Colts defense. I think if they can start to get into a rhythm, only because, I know you know it, but no offense, the Bears offense is so terrible. They don't need to get that many points to pull this one out. Okay. So, if they can just get into a little bit of a rhythm, whether it's the first half, second half, whenever, and put up maybe 21 points, I think they got a shot. So I think it's in the Packers' favor. But again, the Bears have a real opportunity if they can just keep the heat on Rodgers.
They might not need 21 points. You're being a lot you're being a lot nicer to the Bears offense than I'm going to be in a little bit. But Alyssa, you got any questions for Ryan?
I do, but I'd like to thank you, Ryan, for that hope that, albeit however brief it's going to be, but thank you for that.
Sure.
And we were talking about your prediction for the game on Sunday. And since Matt Nagy took over, the last 4 games, actually the last 5, even before he got to Chicago, have all been 1-score games. So these have been some pretty close contests that the Packers, for the most part, have been able to come away with. Do you see something similar happening on Sunday night, even with the Bears' offensive struggles?
I do. Being a divisional game, the Packers generally like to keep it close. At the beginning of the year, they were kind of steamrolling a couple teams here and there, but they've been keeping it close. And the Bears, you guys have got a 4-game losing streak, but it looks like the last 3 against pretty quality teams have been very close. So I don't really expect either team to run away with this.
And so you talked a little bit about Khalil Mack and, that being the matchup that you're watching. Would you say that is the biggest concern for this game? Or, is there another concern that you're going to be looking at, whether it's special teams with Cordero Patterson, who just returned one for a touchdown last week or a couple weeks ago against the Vikings?
It's 100,000% Khalil Mack. If you look at several of these other losses that we've had, you've got the Bosas. With San Francisco, those 2 times. You got the Chargers. That was the other Bosa. There's just these attacking defensive lines that they do not – even Tampa, it was the defensive line that caused that catastrophe. So if Khalil Mack wrecks the offensive line and Aaron Rodgers, that's the one thing that's going to get this to spiral out of control.
All right, Ryan, we really appreciate your time. Before we let you go, Bears fans like to consume Packer content just as much as anything else. So can you tell us what you're working on, where people can find your work and interact with you on social media?
Absolutely. I got several Bears fans and whatnot that listen. I try to be as fair as I possibly can. It's the Packernet Podcast. You can, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find it. If you want to jump in, we've even got some in the Facebook group. Guys tend to keep it kind of cool or whatever. It's a Packernet Podcast Facebook group and page. So feel free to join in and join in on the fun, and we'll have a good conversation.
We appreciate you keeping it fair with us Bears fans. We need all the help we can get. His name is Ryan Schlipp, host of the Packernet Podcast. Ryan, thank you so much. We'll be talking to you down the road.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
All right, we'll be back with more Buffone 55 right after this.
Need a few laughs after a heartbreaking Chicago Bears loss?
They had 5 yards of rushing in the second quarter. Greg, I've seen...
That's from here to the wall.
Yeah.
I was just going to, get up and take my steps here. That looks about right.
In lingerie football, you get more yardage rushing. Well, you get something out of it. Come on, seriously. 20 yards rushing in the first half. Doesn't get much better as the game goes on, by the way.
No. No, the best rush was in the third quarter to the left. And it was...
he says that with anger.
I know.
Win or lose, we're having a good time here at the Bears Barroom Radio Network.
Welcome back to Buffone 55. Now it's time for our B55 segment. That's when I ask John 5 questions, and his responses must be completed within 55 seconds. The 55 is John's tribute to the great Doug Buffone, his uncle, who played 15 seasons with the Bears and wore number 55. So, John, I know we didn't have, any loss to really kind of ignite those impassioned speeches, but are you ready to do this?
I am rested and ready to go this week. I think I'm more ready this week than I have been in weeks past.
Well, John, it is Packers week, so we're going to try to have some fun before, things get out of control on Sunday night.
Great.
So what does the Packers rivalry mean to you, John? You actually have a bloodline into this rivalry. So tell us what beating the Packers means in the Buffone household. Your 55 seconds start right now.
Man, I just hate the Packers. I respect them, but I hate them. I can't stand their colors. I can't stand the cheeseheads. I can't stand that stupid "Go Pack Go" chant. I can't stand Aaron Rodgers. I certainly couldn't stand Brett Favre. I will never wear a pair of Wranglers or a copper-fit sleeve for that very reason. I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I once refused to let a car merge in front of me because it had a Packers decal on it. To me, losing to the Packers is just an extra turn of the knife when the Bears are already bleeding. Every time the Bears lose to the Packers, it feels like losing a playoff game. And unfortunately, sometimes a loss to the Packers is a playoff game or a game that keeps the Bears from making the playoffs. So I'm guessing we're going to touch on this later, so I digress. But there is no other game on the schedule every year that excites me or terrifies me quite like Green Bay. And I'm sure a lot of Packers fans feel the same way towards the Bears. And I think that's what makes this rivalry so engaging and so passionate, is that it feels like there's so much riding on each one.
I'm exactly like you. When I'm teaching in my classroom, I tell the kids, there's nothing green and yellow near each other. It's not allowed. So it's the same thing. So it really is. And I think it, especially on this side of the rivalry, I wish I knew what it was like on the other side where, with the Packers beating the Bears as much as they do. It must be fun.
That would be nice.
It sounds like a lot of fun. But like you said, anytime the Bears are able to beat the Packers, it just feels like they've won a playoff game or they've even won a championship. Yeah. Because that's the closest that we've gotten.
Game. Yeah, that's right. We're at the point now where it's just okay. It's kind of like a mini Super Bowl.
Exactly, and that 2018 game when they won the NFC Championship, the NFC North Championship. Yeah. That was one of those moments where it's wow. So that's what that feels like, So
that was
if the Bears
fleeting moment.
It really was. So if they can find a way, to beat them, oh my goodness, they won't. So sticking with the Packers theme, let's see how deep your hatred runs. So given the current and historic state of the Chicago Bears quarterbacks, would you be warm to the idea of Aaron Rodgers ever coming to the Bears to end his career? The clock starts now.
Okay, this isn't quite like seeing Jimmy Graham or Josh Sitton play for the Packers and then bringing them over to Chicago. This would be a much bigger deal. I just got done saying how much I couldn't stand Aaron Rodgers, and now I'm supposed to bring him onto my team. I just don't know. So I'm going to play the pragmatic card and say it wouldn't make much sense to do it because Rodgers will be 37 next month, and he'll probably be closer to 39 or 40 before the Packers even think about moving on. So a 40-year-old quarterback coming to the Bears when they're most likely rebuilding, I'll say it just doesn't make sense unless the Bears are solely interested in selling tickets, which at that point, who knows? That's just a hard sell for me in general, though. If it were 2018 and you told me the Bears could have Aaron Rodgers with that defense, then it would be pretty hard to say no. But there is something weird about taking a Packers legend and then trying to make him your own. That's why we wanted Mitch Trubisky to succeed so much, because he would have been that homegrown legend. And I guess you could say the same for Rex Grossman, Cade McNown, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, God, the names.
It's going to get worse.
It really is. And like you said, it's really hard to imagine Aaron Rodgers in a Bears uniform. I know some people are like, oh, but bringing a great quarterback, it makes sense. But at the same time, it doesn't feel right. Like you said, it doesn't really make sense.
Not to say that I wouldn't do it. It just feels wrong.
It feels so wrong. Can you imagine? And then it's kind of like some of the things that happen. I'm a Red Wings fan, so it's kind of like when Chris Chelios came from the Blackhawks to the Red Wings, and at first it was really weird. But this is completely different because we're talking about a quarterback. If Aaron Rodgers were to go, if Aaron Rodgers were to go from the Packers to the Bears, it would just be completely it would feel like an alternate universe.
Bizarro world, yeah.
bizarro world. But we probably would still win more games with him than these quarterbacks.
Well, yeah. Don't get me wrong.
So the Packers have clearly gotten the best of the Bears in the past decade in this rivalry. Since 2010, the Bears are 4-17 against the Packers with some serious heartache attached. Does any particular moment stick out to you over the past 10 years? And hopefully this 55 seconds goes by fast. Your time starts now.
Yeah, 55 seconds isn't going to be enough time, but I'll give you the condensed version because there are just too many to count. Plain and simple, the Chris Conte game, Week 17, 2013, NFC North on the line. Rodgers fumbles, and everyone just kind of stands around until Jarrett Boykin picks it up and runs it in for a touchdown. And then Rodgers with the killer over Chris Conte, who missed an interception earlier in the fourth quarter, which people don't talk about. Rodgers hits Randall Cobb on fourth down with 39 seconds left for a 48-yard touchdown. So they had so many opportunities to win that game, and they couldn't do it. Then the Jay Cutler stationary bike game, the 2010 NFC Championship game, B.J. Raji, Caleb Haney. I don't need to go any further. I believe the Packers actually beat the Bears in Week 17 of that year to squeak into the playoffs, and then they end up beating the Bears and winning the Super Bowl. And then you can bring up the Rodgers comeback game in Week 1 of 2018. Packers down 20-3. They ruined Khalil Mack's debut with the Bears. If the Bears win that game, they go 13-3 and then get a first-round bye rather than having to play the double doink game against the Eagles. Those are just some ones that come to mind real quick.
Man, some dark stuff there, John. But you and I know a lot of pain in this rivalry. You and I. So
there's very little positives out of this.
Very little. And like you said, I was thinking of the Conti game and the NFC Championship game. I still remember after the BJ Raji, I remember like my dog could see I was visibly upset, and I just kind of like the commercials that are like, oh hey, congratulations Green Bay Packer fans, your team just won. That came on, and my dad thought I was going to throw something at the TV. I just grabbed my dog and I just went out for a walk and walked it off. It was rough.
Yeah, that was rotten.
Such a rotten feeling. So we're going to detour and get off of the negative stuff, and we're going to go back to the current Bears team, which actually I guess we were staying with the negativity.
Yeah, where's the positive at here?
I was hoping. I keep thinking it's Week 5 here. Yeah. So as the weeks are rolling on, some of the Bears faithful are losing hope that the team will retain star receiver Allen Robinson. So, John, do you think that Robinson is part of the Bears' long-term plans? The clock starts when you do.
Oh, finally, a fun topic. Look, the more I think about it, the more I think Allen Robinson's time in Chicago might be drawing near its end. He could be back next year on a franchise tag, but they could franchise tag him and trade him just as easily. So from Robinson's perspective, he's a 27-year-old star receiver that has never played with a good quarterback. He could sign a massive deal somewhere else and probably churn out the same production. Does he want to be in Chicago during a rebuild? Does he want to see if they bring in a young quarterback that might go through some growing pains? I wouldn't blame him, and I don't think a lot of Bears fans would blame him for moving on to greener pastures. And from the Bears' standpoint, do they want to commit a lot of money to a 27-year-old receiver if they're anticipating a 2 to 3 year rebuild? They'd probably love to save some money at this point, since their highest paid player this year is, get this, Robert Quinn. When you look at total cash, Robert Quinn is being allotted $18.5 million this year. And next year, the top 5 players counting against the cap are on the defensive side of the ball. So it's pretty clear where the priorities are at this point.
And also the question has to be, not only do the Bears want to sign him back, but does he want to come back, like you mentioned? Sure. And every time we have a press conference now with Robinson, like he had on Monday, when he's asked about, his contract extension, when you think about where we were when, his contract, dispute went public, now he's just like, I'm going to let it play out. He doesn't seem bothered by it, which really makes you feel like he knows that he's going to go on. He's going to let it play out and just move on eventually. So, which, is heartbreaking because, he's a great guy to have in the locker room, and an even better football player. So, it's not looking good for, at least in my perspective, looking good for Robinson's future here in Chicago.
The best offensive player, maybe the only good offensive player, might be gone, and he seems very disinterested in talking about the contract extension. So he, like I said, he could come back on a franchise tag. He could be back next year, but then, what's next year at this point? So I guess we'll see.
That's true. So we're going to finish with another big picture question, which we have a lot here on Buffone 55.
We do.
So the Bears have been slipping in this rivalry with the Packers for a while. What do you think needs to change to turn this thing around as we head into a new decade of Bears versus Packers? No clock for this one, John. Tell us what's on your mind.
Well, we talked about this last week, but I think a major overhaul needs to happen. Did you know that heading into the 1990 season, the Bears had a 19-game lead in this rivalry? That doesn't sound like much, but when you only play twice a year normally, that's nearly 10 seasons worth of games they were in front of the Packers. But in the last 30 years, the Bears are 19-42 against the Packers. Heading into 1990, the Bears won 6 of 7 decades against Green Bay. And in 1990 and 1991, it looked like more of the same when the Bears swept the Packers in both seasons. But then, in 1992, guess what happened? Brett Favre came to Green Bay, and the Bears only beat the Packers 3 more times in 8 years. So many thought, well, when Favre leaves, everything will be better. Enter Aaron Rodgers. For almost 30 years, the Packers have had Hall of Fame quarterbacking. And if you want to criticize their lack of championships, be my guest. But there's no denying that the Bears' inability to have any kind of stability at the quarterback position has completely erased their lead in this series and has kept the team from ever being a consistent contender. Once again, the Bears held a 19-game advantage in this rivalry in 1990. They now trail by 4 games in the year 2020. So this isn't completely Matt Nagy's fault or Mark Trestman's fault or John Fox's fault or Jay Cutler's fault or Rex Grossman's fault or Curtis Enos's fault or Cedric Benson's fault or Chris Williams' fault or Gabe Karimi's fault. The whole issue isn't even Ryan Pace's fault or Phil Emery's fault or Jerry Angelo's fault. And I don't know if this should be directed at Ted Phillips or the McCaskey family, but this has been a systemic problem for 3.5 decades. We talk about the 85 Bears like it just happened last year. We cling to the monsters of the Midway label, and the franchise just rests on its laurels. 1 Super Bowl, and you got complacent for the better part of 40 years? Something needs to change. Everything needs to change. But who's going to be the one to do it? And once again, we the fans will just wait and wait and wait. We'll be back with Buffone's Basement right after this.
Recently on the Mike North Advantage, Mike and Mark Potash of the Chicago Sun-Times, who covers the Bears, had a discussion about Mitchell Trubisky.
Part of the message that bothers me and that a lot of Bear fans bought into is that Trubisky's a bust, like Ryan Leaf, Jamarca. Those are busts. Maybe Trubisky doesn't fit in the Nagy system because I got to believe, Mark, and I don't know where you stand on this, so I'll ask you this. I think 3-4 teams go after him during the offseason.
There's no doubt Trubisky is going to get another chance. Just look at Ryan. He's Ryan Tannehill, basically. His numbers are actually, after 44 games, I looked this up, Mike, his numbers were actually, Trubisky's numbers are better than Tannehill's after his first 44 games. So he's basically the same thing, not the same type of quarterback, but he's basically the same situation. So there's no doubt that Trubisky could still be a good quarterback. Put Trubisky on the Chiefs offense and put Mahomes in the Bears offense, and tell me what the difference in their passer rating is going to be. There's no way that Mahomes is a former MVP and a reigning Super Bowl champion if he goes to the Bears. And Trubisky, I think, I've said this about Trubisky, and I think it's absolutely true. He doesn't have the instincts of a great quarterback, but that doesn't mean he can't be a great quarterback or a productive quarterback. In an offense with the wind at his back, like the Chiefs, like the Saints, some of these great offenses where he doesn't necessarily need those instincts, that it factor, he could be very productive. I agree with you. He's a bust in this system, but that goes to the bigger point. It's the offense. Nick Foles has never been good in a bad offense.
The Mike North Advantage. You can only find it at the Bears Barroom Radio Network.
Welcome back to Buffone 55. It's time for the Buffone's Basement segment. That's when Alyssa and I go down the stairs, kick Aldo Gandia off the recliner, see if he's still awake, and we talk some Bears. Aldo, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Great interview with our Packernet buddy. Yeah, that was great. And, boy, you were on fire. That final B-55, I told you during the break that I was ready to start punching something. I'm so fired up for this game. And really, part of me is hopeful that we can turn this thing around. But, there's the realist in me that says, boy, this is just going to be an ugly game.
Yeah, we talked about, well, at least I talked about some of my worst Packers memory within the last 10 years. We'll go around, and I'll start with you, Aldo, just because you're the senior fan on this show. What are some of your worst Packer memories that you can remember against the Bears?
Well, yeah, given that I've been on this earth twice as long as any of you guys, I've got a much longer list of things to pick from. You know, there's the Don Majkowski miracle game where they used instant replay to overturn a call when the Packers quarterback was clearly past the line of scrimmage, yet they looked at the replay and decided to, break our hearts here in Chicago anyway. There's that Monday Night Football game that was dedicated to Gale Sayers and Mike Ditka. It was a rainstorm, and it was I think the Bears lost by a score of 33-6, and so that was a terrible game. But the one that immediately comes to mind, because it was probably among my first broken heart games, was the one in 1980. It was a 6-6 game, and in overtime, the Packers kicker Chester Marco is trying to kick a game-winning field goal, and it's blocked by the Bears' Alan Page. And the ball goes right back directly to him, and he runs it in for the game-winning touchdown.
Oh, my Lord.
And that was such a heartbreaking loss against a team that by 1980 I had been well-programmed to hate the Packers for many of the same reasons you listed, John, the uniforms, the smell of cheese, everything and beyond, but that game was really a kick in the nuts.
Alyssa, I'm guessing that your memories are probably closer to mine, talking about the last decade of whether it's the Chris Conte game, the NFC Championship game, what have you.
Yeah, those are the two that really stand out. That NFC, like I was talking about before, that NFC Championship. It's it hurt just losing the game before going to the Super Bowl, but the fact that it was the Packers that dealt the blow, it just felt like a kick in the gut. Oh God, even thinking about it now, like I still have not rewatched that game to this day. I will not. It just brings back so much, so many bad memories. I still get flustered talking about it. Oh, this team, we've had a lot of bad memories, John.
Yeah, and I remember before that 2010 game, my Uncle Doug put out a video predicting that the Bears would beat the Packers and go to the Super Bowl, and he laid out all the reasons why, and it got me really jazzed up, and I believed him. And I remember after the game we talked, because he would come on my radio show after that, and he's just like, what? He's like, this is just so typical, just so typical. It's just why we get our hopes up, and you think that they have all the weapons necessary to go in and win the ball game, and then Cutler can't go, and Caleb Haney comes in, and BJ Raji starts dancing, and it's just like, man, when are those breaks ever going to happen for the Bears? When is that ever going to go Chicago's way? And it's just like I said, we wait and we wait and we wait. But let's talk a little bit about this current Bears team. Going into it, we're at the time of recording this, Mitch Trubisky was present at practice, and Nick Foles was still not, dealing with that hip injury. Obviously, Trubisky dealing with his shoulder injury. Right now, I would probably lean towards saying Trubisky is going to be the guy who's going to start for the Bears. But any pushback from you guys, Aldo?
It really is a difficult decision, because first and foremost, the problem with the team is up front at the offensive line. So any quarterback that you put in is going to be faced with that challenge. And so you say, well, Mitch Trubisky has the legs to escape that rush and at least get you some positive yards running away from that pass rush. But a lot of times what can happen when you have poor pass protection is that your quarterback ends up looking like a chicken with his head cut off back there. Panic sets in and mistakes are made. And so unless, Mitch Trubisky is coached and schematically he's coached to, limit the amount of pass options, so he's not back there trying to process, who the second and third and fourth options are, and is instead taught to, look at this first option and then look potentially at this second option, and if they don't open up quickly, then run for it. Unless that is the option, then you're really stuck with two poor choices at quarterback. So, I would like to give Mitch Trubisky the opportunity to see if he's learned anything while he has been on the sidelines and been able to maybe process things, and with the help of seeing a veteran quarterback there. But again, it's the offensive line that's the big determination. James Daniels went down, and I'm beginning to think that the loss of that left guard had a ripple effect on the entire team from an offensive line perspective. And we've seen Nick Foles, he's just lost his confidence. He's thrown off his back foot, and boy, it's just a mess. But to answer your question, I apologize for being so long-winded about it. I do think that, Mitch Trubisky should be given an opportunity to see if he can salvage his career and provide a spark with his legs that this offense has not seen since he was benched.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think the one thing we can say when Trubisky was benched and when Foles came in, what we've learned is it was not the quarterback, or at least not just the quarterback. This offense has a lot, bigger issues, but at the same time, I feel like even if both Trubisky and Foles are healthy, I feel like at this point you have to go back to Mitch, because your offense just needs some kind of spark, kind of like when Foles was brought in the third quarter against the Falcons, and he brought a spark, right? That's something that this offense needs, because it feels like they've just been stuck in neutral for the last month, and it just feels like they're getting worse with every passing week. And not to say Trubisky's the answer, he clearly isn't, neither is Foles, but you need to do something to get this offense going, and I know that he is not going to do it all on his own, but I feel like you owe Trubisky, like you said, Aldo, to see if he's learned anything and to see what he can do. Maybe, he'll be auditioning for a new team next year. Let's see what he can really do.
Yeah, I like what you said there as far as, I said this last week, it's okay to admit that both of these options suck. Like, it's okay to say that, well, I'd prefer neither, but if they're going to start somebody, listen, I was on board for Nick Foles coming in. I was never a Mitch person. I won't say I was a Mitch hater, because I desperately wanted it to work out. You take a quarterback number 2 overall, you hope he works out, and you hope that he's the franchise guy for the next 15, 20 years. But I was okay with Nick Foles taking over the reins, and now that I see what Nick Foles is doing, I'm just like, man, they got nothing. But at least throw the young guy in there, I guess, now to see what he can do. And I think you're right. He is auditioning for his next gig. I don't see any scenario where Mitch Trubisky comes out and plays and they're like, okay, this guy, we got to sign him. He's coming back next year. I just don't see any possible scenario for that. And I think this is a good opportunity for Matt Nagy's ego to withstand going back and admitting that he was wrong, because he can say that, Nick Foles isn't really ready yet. That hip is giving him problems. And, Nick Foles isn't exactly the most mobile guy to begin with. If he has something that's making him even more of a statue, that's not what you want either. So you can say that, he's not ready yet. That hip pointer or whatever the injury is really holding him back. Mitch is ready to go, and he's going to be our guy. That being said, it's not. Let's talk about the prospects for Mitch Trubisky real quick, because I don't think he's on the Bears next year. I don't know if he is going to get into a situation where he's, going to be called upon to be the starter. I don't know if he's going to even be brought onto a team to compete for a number 1. Aldo, what do you think his prospects are? Because don't forget, he's still pretty young. He's pretty mobile, but he's also, I think this is the third straight year that he's had a shoulder injury. Yeah. Is that what do you think that he really commands as far as the market goes?
Yeah, but quick question for you is, what if he is inserted in at quarterback and he plays fairly well? Do you still think that it's you're not going to see him back, particularly if he were to agree like on a 1-year prove-it deal or a 2 or 3 year deal that is similar to the contract Nick Foles has, and so you go with Foles and Trubisky the next couple of years? Because if he is inserted in at quarterback, and if they hold on and make the playoffs, or at least end up with a winning record, then you are probably looking at the prospects of not being able to land a one of the quarterbacks in the draft that looks like a plug-and-play player. You know, you'd have to basically lose all of the games to have a shot at any of those QBs. So what do you think if he comes back in and plays well? I'd be interested in hearing Alyssa's thought on that too.
Yeah, I don't see it. Just because I think they have to have Nick Foles on, just because of the way his contract is worked out. Nick Foles is going to be on this team next year, and if you say we're going with Mitch and we're going with Mitch and Foles again next year, then you have Pace and Nagy are retained. I think you have officially put the last nail in your coffin, because you're going to have the same results. I just don't see any possible scenario, because even if you draft a quarterback relatively high, you're going to carry 3 quarterbacks. Are you going to have 3 guys active every week? You're going to put your first or second round pick on the practice squad. So I don't see any scenario. And even from Mitch's point of view, if I'm his agent, I'm like, why do I want to stay with a prove it deal in Chicago where the offense is a mess, the offensive line is a mess? Let's go get a 1-year prove it deal like Jameis Winston guy in New Orleans, because he's going to be back on the market, or go get a prove it deal like Andy Dalton or Cam Newton. At least they had opportunities to go start somewhere, and I don't think and flourish somewhere if they need to. Jameis Winston's learning under Sean Payton and Drew Brees, and he's learning how to be maybe he's learning how to not turn the ball over as much. And I get that he got passed over for Taysom Hill, but still, what he's taking out of that year is going to be pretty valuable whenever he hits free agency again. So I don't know what Mitch Trubisky is going to say 1 year with the Chicago Bears, back with Matt Nagy, back with this franchise that benched me, back with this offensive line that can't protect me. Why would I want to sign a 1-year deal here? I can go sign a 1-year deal anywhere, make it just as much money, and maybe learn something. So I don't see any scenario where he's back, even if he plays okay, and they like I said, they go ass backwards into the playoffs. I just don't see it. I could be wrong. I don't see it.
Yeah, I'm with John. I mean, even though it would be very Bears for that to happen, where they do sign him for a 1-year deal, but I don't see it, because also, Trubisky would have to agree to it too. And like you said, looking at there are better opportunities out there for him than coming back and working with Matt Nagy, like John said, who benched him, and you see what you have in this offense. I would love to see Trubisky go to New England or New Orleans and see what he can really do with a competent offensive mind and with those coaches. Because, I mean, if I'm Trubisky and, I have the potential to go to New Orleans or New England or Chicago, I'm getting the heck out of Chicago. I'm getting as far away from them as I possibly can. So that's why it's going to be important to see what he does here, if, assuming he does get the last 6 games here, to show these teams what he can do. He is auditioning, I think. So if I don't see how he's back here in 2021.
Well, and to answer your question, I think that he is going to be looked upon by some teams as a quarterback that, we would like to take a chance on him. Let's try to work out a deal with him because of the physical athletic skills that he has, and that people will say, we know how to fix him. There will be some coaches out there who will say, we can turn him around just like the Titans turned around Ryan Tannehill. Let's find him a big power back who we can feed the ball to 15 to 25 times a game. Let's make it a run-based offense with a team that's defensive-centric. And we believe that he could be our guy and, have another quarterback in developmental phase. Boy, wouldn't that be nice if the Bears tried to do something like that? Oh, well.
Well, it's really funny, because I was listening to our friends over at the Under Center podcast, JJ Stankovic and Cam Ellis. They said, isn't it kind of ironic that if Mitch hit free agency and Mitch wasn't on the Bears, he's the kind of free agent that the Bears would bring in? Like, doesn't that seem like a guy that came in with a lot of hype, kind of underperformed a little bit, shows some physical attributes, shows some flashes, and the Bears are like, yeah, we could fix that. We could mold that to our system. It is ironic, because I think that's spot on that Mitch would be, and I still don't think he's gonna come back next year. But it's like, if Mitch was on a different team, that's the kind of free agent that the Bears would go after. So, but that you bring up an interesting fact or an interesting point about who would be in the market for that. Now, let's play a game, and I'm not. This is not a. I'm literally making this up as we go along, so bear with me. But it's kind of who would you rather have, and so I'll start with Aldo and go over to Alyssa. If you look at some of the free agents, they're going to hit there's going to hit the market next year. Would you rather have Jameis Winston or Mitch Trubisky?
I'm so glad you're going first.
I would rather have Mitch Trubisky. I really, really would. And the reason why is because Winston is just proven to be so turnover prone. And so, what do the Saints do? They sign him as their backup quarterback, but when Drew Brees misses a game, they don't use him. They go with Taysom Hill, right? So, I think that's an indictment of what they've seen out of him so far. So, and turnovers are the worst thing a quarterback can do, right? So I would probably say Trubisky.
Alyssa?
I'm actually going to say the same thing, surprisingly. I think I would stick with Trubisky because, it was perfect what Aldo brought up about, Winston being turnover prone, and you have a defense that does a good job of holding teams to under 20 points. And if you make those kind of mistakes like Winston's prone to doing, that's going to make it even more difficult. But then at the same time, he can throw a lot of touchdowns too, but we haven't seen him in this Bears offense. But I still think I kind of want to revisit this too at the end of the year. Let's see what Trubisky can do in the last 6 games because, because I'm still a little unsure. But at least at this point, in this moment, I'm kind of leaning slightly towards Trubisky.
Give me Jameis.
Really?
Jameis. I'm interested to see what he learned in that year at New Orleans. And hey, look what happened. I mean, this guy he threw 30 touchdowns and 5,000 yards. I understand the turnovers. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Jameis would turn the franchise around, but for the sake of the game, hey, look what the Bruce Arians system is doing to Tom Brady. Tom Brady's throwing all these vertical routes now, and he's getting picked off. So maybe there's something to say for that wide open system down in Tampa Bay where you're a little more prone to turnovers. Now, I'm not saying that Jameis is anywhere near Tom Brady, but I right now, give me the unknown. Give me Jameis. He's proven that he can at least throw for a bunch of yards and a bunch of touchdowns. I mean, the defense can be as good as you want, but if as we've seen, if the offense can't score any points, then it doesn't really matter. But how about Andy Dalton? Although you want Andy Dalton, or you want Mitch Trubisky?
Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah,
that's it. Enough said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with Trubisky too.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go 3 for 3 there. I'll take Mitch Trubisky over Andy Dalton. Here's an interesting one. How about Jacoby Brissett?
I like Jacoby Brissett. I would take a shot of Jacoby. I was surprised that they signed Phillip Rivers, and I think Jacoby is done with his contract. He's a free agent next year, huh?
Yeah.
That one unequivocally yes, Mr. Jacoby Brissett. Welcome to Chicago.
Okay, yeah, I'm leaning a little bit more towards Brissett too. I'll take him. Like we said, bring me in someone new. Jameis didn't really kind of entice me there because I'm just focusing on the turnovers. But yeah, give me a shot at Brissett. Let's see what he can do.
Yeah, I like Brissett too. He's only 27 years old, and he's been with the Patriots. He's thrust into a starting role after Andrew Luck just decided to retire, so he got thrown into a starting role with Indianapolis. Not really expecting that, but I like him. I think he's an intelligent quarterback. I would give him a chance I give him a chance with a strong offensive system, and you can say that for any of these guys we're talking about because we're not talking about top tier guys. But if they had a solid offensive system, then yeah, I would maybe take Brissett. How about a couple of these other ones real quick? Tyrod Taylor. Would you take Tyrod Taylor or would you take Mitchell Trubisky? Aldo.
No thanks on Tyrod. I think he's an interesting player, but I would. As much as I hate saying this because I was never a big fan of Mitch Trubisky when the Bears drafted him, there are certain players in the NFL who are clearly inferior to him or, in my mind, have inferior, or that's not the best word, who have less potential to succeed in the NFL than Mitch Trubisky. And Tyrod is on that list. Jameis Winston is on that list and a few others.
You know what? Give me Tyrod just because, every time an organization seems to bring him in and draft a rookie, that rookie turns out to be good.
Yeah.
Which we could definitely
use. He's the good luck Chuck of the NFL.
He is. So, I'm going Tyrod. Bring Tyrod in because maybe we could find a rookie quarterback now.
I'll change my vote then. That's a good reason.
All right, last one, Cam Newton.
Yeah, I wasn't a proponent of bringing Cam in this past offseason because I'm just concerned about his injury history. I'm concerned about his passing accuracy issues. And I think, we sort of seen that unless he has outstanding pass protection, he sort of is like Nick Foles who can run. And so and because his body has taken so much punishment over the years that his running with the ball is just not sustainable. So, I love the Cam Newton of the MVP season. He took his team to the playoffs. That was a good player, but he's not that player anymore, and I don't think he will ever be that player just because of, it's very, very difficult to maintain that style of play in the NFL.
You know what? Give me a shot at Cam. I want to see what Cam can do here. I mean, he already knows how to run for his life, so maybe he'll do well behind this offensive line. I mean, if we're talking like a 1-year deal here, I mean, I wouldn't be against seeing Cam in a Bears uniform.
Yeah, if we're just talking straight up, I'm not talking about who do you want to be your starter, as we're talking about Trubisky verse. I'll take Cam Newton just because we talk about Cam Newton's injury risk, but and we're talking about his inaccuracy problems. What are we talking about with Mitch Trubisky? I mean, at least Cam Newton has shown that he can perform on a high scale. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's won an MVP. And if we're just talking about who would you rather have on your team right now, give me Cam Newton. I did lie. How about one more? Dak Prescott. Who are you taking?
Hey, clean sweep here.
I'll take Dak Prescott on one leg over just about half the quarterbacks in the NFL. Just real quick, there are, by my calculation, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams who will be looking for a new starting quarterback next season, or at the very least a developmental quarterback because their veteran is on his last legs, like a Matt Stafford or a Phillip Rivers. So there's going to be a lot of teams out there who are going to look at Mitch Trubisky. There are going to be a lot of teams who will be drafting quarterbacks before the Bears draft unless the Bears lose their next 5 games. So, this is, and you've been talking about it, John, for the last few weeks. The Bears have a huge, huge challenge ahead of them. They've got to figure out a way to bring in a winning quarterback, free agent, draft, something. And I'm worried about that. I've been worried about it for the last year. And this is Ryan. This is going to be on Ryan Pace's tombstone. Is he screwed up the Bears quarterback position, and because he didn't draft Mahomes, he didn't draft Watson, or he didn't. ... So this is really worrisome. And again, John, you talked about it on a recent Buffone 55. You said if you're Aldo's age, I'm paraphrasing, if you're Aldo's age, you're in trouble because you're not going to see a winner here for a while because of what the hole that Ryan Pace has built for this team. It's very, very deep.
Yeah, and Alyssa, I assume you want Dak Prescott over Mitch Trubisky.
Oh yeah, give me Dak. I thought that was a sweep. Yeah.
But you bring up this good point about how they dug themselves in a hole. So one, they keep Ryan Pace. We always love that when he's we love that he's aggressive in the draft and he moves up and he goes up and he spends extra draft capital to get Mitch Trubisky. He spends extra draft capital to get Anthony Miller. They used extra draft capital to bring in David Montgomery. They used extra draft capital to get Travis Gibson, who's been a healthy scratch for a lot of the year. Mm-hmm. And so we're looking at a team that needs to rebuild yet keeps decimating their draft capital. And I am all for, you want your guy, you go up and get him. But was it worth right now using extra draft capital to get Anthony Miller? Was it worth it to use extra draft capital to get Travis Gibson? Or Mitch Trubisky, or even if you want to say, was it? I mean, I still think that it is, but was it worth the extra draft capital to bring in Khalil Mack? So you look at how you're depleting a lot of your draft capital and how you're going to replenish this team, other than throwing a lot of money around in free agency. You better hit on those draft picks that you'd moved up for. And I don't see Anthony Miller as a transcendent player. I don't see, as much as I love David Montgomery, I don't see him as a transcendent running back. We haven't even seen Gibson yet. So and whenever you're supposed to replenish these guys, you're hoping that these picks that you moved up for really take you to the next level. And they clearly have not done that. And also when they moved up to get Leonard Floyd, and then they had to go and sign Robert Quinn to be a Band-Aid there. They draft Shaheen, who somehow got extended in Miami. They draft Shaheen, but they had to go get a Band-Aid by drafting Cole Kmet later. They drafted Trubisky. They had to go out and get a Band-Aid with Nick Foles after that. So not only are they moving up in drafts, but they're also using free agents to make up for bad draft picks. Does it get much worse of a hole than that? And I'll digress and listen to what you have to say about it, Aldo.
While you're saying that, I got this image of the Bears logo with Band-Aids all over it. You're exactly right. This has been a general manager who has just had to cover up his mistakes because high draft capital has failed him. And we talked, I think, during the break about the Bears not having drafted only drafting 2 first-round quarterbacks since 2004. We talked about the offensive line not being addressed with high draft capital. And in this most recent draft, you mentioned with our guest that, John Runyon Jr., who is going to play against the Bears, and we'll see how good he is against a really good pass rush, meaning the Bears. But he, by all accounts, has been playing very well, and this guy should have been drafted in that 5th round. The Bears picked Kindle Vildor and should have picked John Runyon, who played at Michigan. He was coached by Juan Castillo, who was brought in by Jim Harbaugh to be a special assistant and help with the offensive line. So there was familiarity with him. And so what do the Bears do instead? They pick these 2 long shots in the 7th round, guys who didn't play at top schools and so didn't face top competition. So they're clearly developmental players, guys that they scouted and said, in 2 or 3 years they could help. We need help now, So you're totally right. Bottom line is this, this general manager, Ryan Pace, has just had a lot of failings, and unless he turns it around, because I'm certain he's going to be here at least one more year. Unless he turns it around quickly, he's bye-bye in 2022.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we talked about all of the times he's traded up to grab somebody. And we've talked a lot about how it's been a win now mode for Ryan Pace the last few years. And now we're getting to the point where it's no longer now. And so now we have to deal with the repercussions of all those moves that you have been making not working out, which is the problem here. So, I mean, like you said, Aldo, I still think that Pace will be around next year and he'll be gone in 2022. But, it's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens these last 6 games, to see if, maybe the Bears lose out, or maybe it's a complete and utter collapse. What you think is going to happen here with Pace and Nagy?
Yeah, I hate the notion that everyone's talking about, well, we're going to give him one more year. Well, hell, we did that with John Fox, and I hate when there's these lame duck GMs and lame duck coaches who the talent isn't there to make the playoffs. So if they don't make the playoffs, they're probably going to get canned. So we're just spinning our wheels for a year waiting for the inevitable to happen. But yeah, it's whenever you're all in. That's what all in means. It's we're going to win now or next year, or, we have a 3-year window. Well, they use their all in time for this. They use their all in to miss the playoffs last year and possibly miss the playoffs again this year. They were all in whenever they had their first good year at 12-4, made the playoffs and got bounced in the first round. That was all in. That's what All In was for. And now you deal, like you said, Alyssa, with the repercussions of that. Normally, it's off of, okay, we got our championship, so let's try to rebuild it again. We got a playoff game, and now it's just like, okay, let's rebuild now. So it's not like other franchises where you're all in and you see, Seattle, whenever they go and they use that defense and they win it, they go to 2 straight Super Bowls and they win one of them. The win now Bears means, well, we might make the playoffs, and then we got to strip it down and we got to go 4-12 or 5-11 for a couple years before we can maybe make another run at the playoffs. Like that. I hate that. I hate that the bar is so low to like just make the playoffs. I mean, when's the last time the Bears were like serious? Like people thought that they were serious Super Bowl contenders. They surprised everybody in 2018, and then I don't think they've been a real serious Super Bowl contender going into the season since. In the mid 2000s, maybe 04, 05, 06, then they were in that discussion. So it's just that the win now is just like, okay, now we got to pay for those win now years we had. Well, what happened during the win now years? Oh, we went to the playoffs once and lost in the first round. Oh, cool. That'll be worth a 2-year, 3-year rebuild. That great. And I'm just so tired of that. I'm just tired of that in general being the mentality.
A quick question. Do you, for the first time in my life that I can remember, I'm almost feeling like, man, maybe we should just consider tanking, just start putting, not purposely tanking games, but, put in a lot of the young guys now and start to take a look, especially if you lose after the Packers, because, then we're stuck in that rut that John just described. And maybe, you start to evaluate some of these young guys and maybe they help us win. Maybe, and that would be good news. You end up with a 9-7 record, but you learn that Duke Shelley can play. You learn that Kendall Wilder can play. You learn that Arlington Hambright can play, and so that is a good foundation. But if you end up losing, then maybe we've got a shot at one of those better quarterbacks, or maybe you have a shot at drafting some better offensive linemen. I hate to feel that way. I'm not a tank guy, but maybe we're at that point.
I don't see how the Bears would do that, because I feel like with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy, their jobs are on the line. But I mean, right. I'm with you, Aldo. It's time to start thinking about that, because the Bears need a quarterback. We know that, and with every passing win, say they win like 4 of their last 6 and they miss the playoffs, what was it all for? You dipped further in the draft standings, and now one of those top quarterbacks isn't on the board for you. So we're in limbo, which is the worst place to be.
This has the potential to be really messy, and for a number of reasons. One, they're still in their win now mode, which means they have a lot of money on the books. So you still got to pay Danny Trevathan. You still got to pay Robert Quinn. You got to pay them next year. And so you got a lot of bad money out there for some aging guys. And if you really want to start doing draft capital stuff, look what the Dolphins did. They traded everybody away. And they ended up getting a slew of draft picks, and now they're actually in a position where they're overperforming now. They got their quarterback, and they could potentially make a playoff run. But they traded everyone away. They traded Minkah Fitzpatrick. They traded Laramie Tunsil. So this could get a hell of a lot worse before it gets any better, and that might mean trading somebody that's on the books. First of all, I'm not advocating this at all. I'm just talking about potential outcomes here. There could be a trade for an Akeem Hicks. There could be a trade for a Khalil Mack. No one's going to take Robert Quinn with that contract probably, but you could see a Kyle Fuller trade or something of that nature where the Bears. But I don't think it's going to be from Ryan Pace, because then I don't think the Bears organization is going to give Ryan Pace 3 years to rebuild after seeing what he's done in the past 4 or 5. So. I think that if a new GM comes in, they might just say, let's blow this up. Let's trade what we got. Let's trade these aging guys. The Bears have the oldest defense in the league. And if you feel like it's going to take 3 years before you're competitive again, go get a first-round pick for Kyle Fuller. Go get a first-round pick for Khalil Mack or a second-rounder or first-rounder for Akeem Hicks. So I'm not saying that that's what they should do, but I'm saying that is a real possibility where the Bears, their strength that's their strength on the field, but that's also going to be their strength when it comes to negotiating and getting some more draft capital or trying to rebuild this team. Because if they're going to rebuild and they're thinking we're looking to 2022 or we're looking to 2023, Akeem Hicks isn't going to be part of those plans. I don't know if Khalil Mack's going to be part of those plans. Danny Trevathan's not going to be part of those plans. So there is a possibility that you could see some of their only assets get traded away for draft capital. And once again, I don't know if that's what they should do, but I think that is a real possibility at this point.
Yeah, it's a really, really difficult situation that this team is in now, and that's why I'm hoping and praying that they can turn this thing around this year with the quarterbacks that they have. I don't care who it is, Foles, Trubisky. I don't care if Tyler Bray comes in. If he can get the job, if he can get the job done and we can win and we can, go to the Super Bowl, I'd be happy. But man, it's just not looking good for the future of this team. It looks like, they might have to start a rebuilding process, and it's going to be interesting. But I'm not hopeful what the near future looks like after this season. I'm not giving up hope on this season. I'm hoping that the offensive line gets corrected and we get better quarterback play. But if that doesn't happen, we're in trouble.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, I think rebuilding is on the horizon here. Hopefully the rest of this year, maybe next year, before you really got to start considering that. So I mean, I think it's about to get pretty ugly here. Being a Bears fan, even though it already has been during this win now mode.
All right, one more thing before we wrap it up here, guys. Some of the semifinalists for the Hall of Fame were released. Lance Briggs, Peanut Tillman, and Olin Kreutz all left out of the semifinalist list for Hall of Fame voting. So pretty. I mean, a lot of Chicago Bears fans are going to be upset about that. Aldo, big snubs across the boards there?
I don't think so. I don't think any of them, because all three of them are first ballot guys, right?
Great question.
Maybe
I think Briggs and Kreutz. No, I think just Peanut was. I think Briggs and Kreutz were up for it last year.
Okay. I still think it's early for all three of them. I think in order, I would say, Peanut and Olin are tied in terms of deserving. I think Briggs is deserving too, but I don't see him being a first year or second year ballot guy getting in. But I don't think it's a diss on any one of them. And I haven't studied who are the finalists, but I bet there are guys that are probably either as deserving or a little more deserving. And so I'm not going to cry. I'm confident that all three of them will eventually make it to the Hall of Fame, and all three are very, very deserving. And the one thing that all three of them have in their favor is that they are probably going to be well represented when their time does come to make those final arguments. Dan Pompei, who made the argument for Brian Urlacher, I'm sure that he is going to do a good job of representing those guys. Peanut Tillman is definitely the best cornerback in Chicago Bears history. I don't think there's any argument or debate on that. I think Olin Kreutz is one of the best centers in NFL history and definitely in Bears history. And Lance Briggs, there's always the argument that he benefited from Urlacher's play, and but also some people say Urlacher benefited from his play. And if Brooks, the guy from Tampa Bay Bucks, is in the Hall of Fame, then Briggs should be in there. And I think that's a good argument. So I think all three will eventually make it. The fact that they're not finalists this year doesn't break my heart, though.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not surprised that they didn't make the semifinalist list. I do think they will all be there eventually. But hey, I think Jared Allen is also part of that semifinalist. So we got a bear in there.
I bet he goes in as a bear, don't you? He's more likely to go in as a panther at this point. Yeah,
still got representation.
Traded for Jared Allen. You know what? We should change to the 3-4, make Jared an outside linebacker. That works out really well. But yeah, I agree. I think Briggs, Peanut, and Kreutz all get in at some point. I think there's a lot of weight that get put on some of the first ballot guys or even second ballot guys. You look at some of the guys that had to have wait. Chris Carter comes to mind. So I think there's plenty of time for these guys to make it, and eventually they will be. And I just think there's a process. I think there's a process to what this has to go through. But all right, before we close things out, I want to make sure people are aware of a new show that Alyssa and I debuted. Well, going on a couple months ago now. We're still very super excited about it. We call it Pass the Mic, a show all about empowering female voices in sports media. We bring on some phenomenal women from very different backgrounds, and we talk about their journey and the struggles they've gone to get to where they are today. It's just incredible that every week or every show that we have a different guest, their journey to where they're at is so different. And so we've talked to people from the New York Post, we've talked to people from ESPN Radio, we've talked to Peggy Kaczynski, who legendary sportscaster in Chicago. It's just incredible to hear how they got to where they are. Some of them didn't even start in media and ended up there. Some of them wanted to be that from the time that they were children. So it's always fun. It's always new, and all of these shows are evergreen. So you can go back through the entire library and listen to all of them because they're it's not timely. So please put that in your line of things you're going to listen to in the car or at home. But pretty fun show, especially, Alyssa and I, we always have a good time on the podcast. At least I do. I don't want to speak for you, Alyssa. I know that I do.
Oh, no, definitely. And one of the things I love is how fresh the episodes are, because we have done quite a few of them. And, maybe listeners are like, well, isn't it the same thing every week? But it's not. Like, we are discussing the same subject matter, but everything is so unique, and they all have, unique responses and different journeys, and just, being able to listen to them and their journeys and the things that they've dealt with, to the successes that they have. It's really some of like the best times of our week. So, we're really excited to keep this going, and we hope that you guys listen.
Absolutely. We hope everyone gives it a listen. Share it with your friends, and don't forget, after every Chicago Bears game, Aldo, Tyler, Ellis, and I will give you our immediate thoughts about the Bears' performance. You can only imagine how that goes. On the new post-game show called Bear Football, we'll be on after the Sunday night game with the Packers. We'd love to talk about a win, but we'll talk about a loss just as passionately. So that's Bear Football after every Chicago Bears football game right here on the Barroom Network.
And I'm really hoping you guys are talking about a win, but I feel like regardless win-loss, it's going to be very impassioned. So make sure you guys stay tuned to check out that Bear Football. And let me add, the best way to stay informed with everything happening here at the Barroom is to visit the newly opened website, barroomnetwork.com. Make sure you bookmark that so you can find it, and make sure to bookmark bearswire.com. I'm the managing editor over there, and we've got plenty of news getting you ready for Bears-Packers week here on Sunday Night Football.
Awesome stuff. But that will do it for us this week. We appreciate everybody tuning in. For Aldo Gandia, Alyssa Barbieri, I'm John Buffone. We'll see you next week, everybody.